James Krishner back here, part 3 of the top 10 players to have not been inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So far, we've made it through 6, and from here on out, the list of players and their credentials is only going to get greater. To recap the list, let's go through numbers 10 through 5. Number 10, wide receiver Sterling Sharp. Number 9, defensive end L.C. Greenwood. Number 8, running back Ricky Watters. Number 7, strong safety Donnie Shell. Number 6, wide receiver Tim Brown. Number 5, linebacker Kevin Green. And now, number 4. Number 4 on the list of top 10 players to have not been inducted in the Hall of Fame. Guard Jerry Kramer. The only offensive lineman to appear in this list. 3-time Pro Bowler, 5-time All-Pro. And he won 2 Super Bowls in 1966 and 67 as a member of the Green Bay Packers. And also was a part of the teams that won 3 NFL championships in 61, 62, and 65 prior to the birth of the Super Bowl. What Jerry Kramer is most known for is not for, a statistic or a number. When you think of the Green Bay Packers of the 60s, you think Lombardi at the blackboard and his play. Seal here, run the play in the alley. Well, getting the seal was the guard's job, to go around the center and to block for the running back to create a giant hole in which the running back could break off a big run. And there was nobody in the history of the game that was faster and more athletic and better at that particular skill than Jerry Kramer. The fact that Jerry Kramer, who on my NFL all-time team is my starting guard, has not been inducted in the Hall of Fame yet, that's kind of depressing, because he might have been the best offensive guard of his day. He probably was. Probably was the best offensive lineman in the league at that point, next to maybe his guy he played next to for how many years, tackle Forrest Gregg. But what needs to be said about Jerry Kramer is, the reason that the power sweep in Green Bay worked, the play that Lombardi was so noted for running, was because of the athleticism and the strength of Jerry Kramer. If not for that play, they can't run the power sweep. And if not for the power sweep, they probably wouldn't have ever won a single NFL title. So you could probably thank Jerry Kramer for all 5 of their titles. Now, the reason Jerry Kramer hasn't been inducted is because guards don't get, a fair break in this business in terms of, being recognized. But I think it more or less has to do with the fact that 11 players, counting head coach Vince Lombardi, have already been inducted in the Hall of Fame off of the Packers teams from the 60s. The fact that you have 11 Hall of Famers off one team, one of them's your coach, and 10 are on the field, that's 5 per each side of the football, really. I'm pretty sure that's the number they had. That's a pretty preposterous amount. And a lot of the inductors probably think, this team couldn't have any more Hall of Famers. Kind of the same way Donnie Shell and L.C. Greenwood get screwed over for the Steelers because of how many players have already been inducted. But Jerry Kramer absolutely deserves a place in Canton because, remember, he's the key player on the key play that powered the offense of maybe one of the greatest teams in league history. Without him, none of their success is possible. So to see Jerry Kramer go all these years and not be inducted, not only is it surprising, it's a tragedy. Moving on, it's number 3 on our list, is a player who is indelible and unforgettable in the minds of almost every Steeler fan. The Bus, Jerome Bettis. One of the greatest power runners in the history of the NFL. Surprisingly quick for a man his size and his build. 4th most rushes in league history. 6th in rushing yards. 10th rushing touchdowns. 6 Pro Bowls and 2 All-Pro performances. And a Super Bowl win following the 2005 year, which would be his last year in the league. Jerome Bettis. It's funny because when you look at a lot of the great running backs that won Super Bowls, or a lot of the great running backs in the Hall of Fame, guys like Jim Brown, who played with quarterbacks like Frank Ryan, who were pretty good. You have Emmitt Smith play with Troy Aikman. You have Earl Campbell played with Dan Pastorini. You have other guys in the list that play with some top-notch quarterbacks. Curtis Martin had Chad Pennington for some of his career. Had a couple really good years from Vinny Testaverde and Drew Bledsoe. Jerome Bettis' quarterbacks were Kent Graham and Cordell Stewart and Tommy Maddox prior to the arrival of Ben Roethlisberger in 2004. Jerome Bettis totaled how many 1,000-yard seasons with Cordell Stewart as his quarterback? To put that in perspective, he would have been playing against 8- and 9-man fronts every game because you know Cordell and you know Kent Graham, they don't have the ability to win with their arms. They can't win games with their arms. And even in the 3 years he was in LA and he ran for a lot of yards. Can you name his quarterbacks? No, you can't. He played before Ben Roethlisberger came along. He played for some really bad quarterbacks. And to accumulate, at one point, he was the 4th leading rusher in league history before Curtis Martin and LaDainian Tomlinson passed him. To accumulate that total with that piss poor of a surrounding offensive cast, not so much from the offensive line, but from the quarterback position, that's phenomenal. That really is. The fact that all those yards, all those touchdowns, with a couple of the worst quarterbacks to ever start for a long period of time. Very, very impressive to add to the Buss's resume. Now moving on from our list. I mentioned at the end of my previous segment, can a player's personality keep him out of the Hall of Fame? But you have to understand something here. The Hall of Fame is not decided by NFL Hall of Famers. The class is not decided. The class is not decided by current players. The players who are inducted in the Hall of Fame are inducted by a panel of 44 sports writers. And the players with the highest percentage totals, have to be at least 80%, make the Hall of Fame. Now, for one, I'd like to just say that the NFL is just such a crackerjack way of deciding Hall of Famers. You get 44 panelists together and vote who've never played football in their lives. You're going to get some mistakes. I think the induction of Michael Irvin over Andre Reed was a big mistake. That was just me. If you have Andre Reed in Dallas and Michael Irvin in Buffalo, and Irvin loses 4 straight Super Bowls and Reed wins 3 in 4 years, you'd have Reed in the Hall of Fame along with Aikman and Emmitt Smith. You would. And speaking of receivers, that's exactly where this is going to head up. This is where we're going to head for my number 2 player. A player who overcame drug problems early in his career, had a cocaine addiction, but once he got cut, changed him. And that player is wide receiver Chris Carter. Drug problems in his 3 years in Philadelphia. Goes to the Vikings. And what do the Vikings give up to get Chris Carter? $100. Chris Carter would eventually go on in the 1990s to have an incredible decade catching the football. And his career statistics are very, very impressive. 1,101 catches, 13,899 receiving yards, 130 receiving touchdowns, 4th, 9th, and 4th in league history, respectively. 8 Pro Bowls, 2 122 catch seasons, 2 All-Pro performances. And let's not forget something else about Chris Carter that isn't a statistic. He has the best hands in league history. Anytime you throw a sideline out to Chris Carter, or the ball is, if Chris Carter can get one hand on the football, there's a 90% chance he's rolling that thing in. If he gets 2 hands in the area, it's going to be a catch. The fact is, his hand-eye coordination was so absurdly good that quarterbacks could just put it in his general area, not even really close to him, just, within like 2 or 3 feet of him. And he would just go up, dive, dig down to catch the football, and he would come up with it because his hands, he could catch anything. There have been people that have been talking to him, and Chris Carter will be running a practice, and he'll be catching footballs. And he'll be talking about some, and he'll be in the middle of mid-sentence and make a ridiculous one-handed catch, and he won't stop talking. Like, he'll continue his sentence like nothing happened. Not too many people in the world have hands like that. But the reason Chris Carter was left out, I think, is sort of his personality issues and the fact that he can kind of be an antagonistic teammate. And the fact that, he will yell at his teammates. And, that kind of can go a little far. You don't always need to be in your teammates' faces. Listen, there is something that he does give her credit for, though. If not for him, Randy Moss isn't as disciplined as he was in Minnesota and in his first year, and he would not have had the rookie year he had without Chris Carter. Would have been maybe less than 1,000 yards. And instead, he leads the league in touchdown catches with 17. But to me, it was just stunning that Chris Carter wasn't elected because he was eligible. His first year of eligibility was 2008, so he missed out in the last 5 years. He actually went and looked up players in the Hall that did not make it on the first try. Alan Page, defensive tackle Vikings, and Vince Lombardi, head coach the Packers, did not make it on the first try. Lombardi not making the first try is mind-numbing. But anyways, Chris Carter, if not first ballot, he was definitely a second ballot Hall of Famer. Absolutely. I mean, he was eligible for 3 years before Jerry Rice was. And who gets inducted first? That doesn't make sense. Because Chris Carter retired 3 years before Jerry Rice did, had 3 more years to be eligible before Rice is up for eligibility, and Chris Carter doesn't make it. I was very surprised when he didn't make it the last 3 years. Definitely was worthy of being a Hall of Famer. Alright, that was numbers 4 through 2. Coming up next, a very, very surprising number 1 on my list. This one is sure to be a shock to you guys. Stay tuned and find out who is my top 10 number 1 player not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame.